Hello and welcome back to this course on how to let that shit go. My name is Gabby and I'm here bringing you guys lesson 2, which is all about forgiveness. So today's lesson is going to be all about how you're going to move from knowing your story, feeling your pain, really dissecting that and knowing where that came from, and now moving into the really crucial element, which is moving beyond that story, moving beyond your victimhood and into the place of really moving forward and letting things go, forgiving the past, forgiving the people who have hurt you, and forgiving yourself. So there's going to be a couple elements I'm going to cover in this lesson. So I'm going to be covering how to forgive others, and that includes people who are both in your life and people who are no longer in your life, because I think a lot of us forget how much the people that we don't even see anymore, how much what they did to us, remember that victim story, what they did to us is still weighing on us. And I think most of our pain ends up happening and being caused by people who are no longer in our lives. But then there's the other side of it. There's the people who we still interact with all the time. This is especially relevant when it's, people who have issues with their family members. And so you're seeing each other often, and it's not like it's not exactly the best idea to set the boundary and never see them again, but you also need to find a way to better navigate going forward in those relationships. And the third and possibly the most crucial aspect is learning how to forgive yourself. Like I shared in the last video, it's oftentimes ourselves that is the hardest person to forgive. Yeah, you've got all this pain from this person, and yet the pain and anger and guilt and shame that you carry about yourself is still even heavier and even worse than that pain that you're holding on to and anger you're holding towards other people. So we're gonna go over all of that. So let's get started. The very first thing I want to cover before we dive into how we are gonna relate and forgive other people and ourselves is that there's one underlying first step that has to happen in every case. And the first step that you have to do is you need to ask yourself the question of, what do you feel was stolen from you? This is huge. And I've shared this in our live streams at Be the Hero Academy. I've shared this on YouTube so many times before. I say it all the time. You cannot have forgiveness. You cannot forgive until you have what you feel was stolen from you or taken from you or you were robbed of. Now, a lot of times what was stolen, what we were robbed of is not actually something that's tangible, right? We're emotional beings, and here we're in forgiveness. It's not like we're holding on to our anger and our resentment. It's something that's unseen, untouched. And so you need to ask yourself the question, and hopefully this is easier for you by now after you do what was shared in lesson 1, which is like telling your story. That's why telling your story is so helpful, because having things on paper and self-reflecting on the things that brought you to that point is gonna make this a lot easier now. And this part is key. It's your key to getting past your pain. It's the key to moving beyond your pain, because this is how you reach joy. You need to have what you feel was stolen from you. Now, a lot of us have some element of feeling like we didn't get to be the person we wanted to be. And that ends up being the majority of what we feel was stolen from us. Now, there's a lot of subtle variations of that depending on your personality, your story, your unique situation. But that's the kind of the overview that you got to wrap your head around, because I can use an example of, I remember specifically one person I had a lot of trouble forgiving. Was someone who was an extended family member and was very much a classic narcissist. And there was this whole, it's a really long story, but the abbreviated version is that in 2020, and I kind of shared this briefly in the last video, in 2020, we rented a house from this extended family member, and we rented the house for 2 years, I believe, but we traveled in the summer, so we ended up staying there for about, maybe 12 months in total. But those 12 months were pretty terrible for me. Of course, my victim story is that it was terrible. It was depressing. It was the worst year of my life and all of these things. And it was this huge dark night of the soul for me, where I had to confront my deeper fears, confront my deeper beliefs. And for a long time, because we were in that situation, I had trouble forgiving this extended family member who not only kind of ushered us into that situation in the first place, but also caused us a lot of pain and struggle while we were there, because there was a lot of emotional manipulation in terms of how we interacted with him as our landlord. It was not just a simple contract of I'm renting from you. There was a lot more to it. There was an degree of narcissistic abuse where there would be acts of kindness that were expected to be reciprocated with attention and other things, and then it would come out in really forms of quite disruptive, not just aggression, but really unkind behavior, really manipulative behavior. But that's what a narcissist does. They sandwich it with seemingly acts of kindness to make it seem like they're this really good person, that how dare you not allow my imperfections. And so that caused a whole thing. And in the end, it resulted in me, along with many siblings and parents, having this huge resentment, this anger, this thing I needed to forgive, but I didn't really want to. You don't deserve my forgiveness. Okay, so if we're gonna take the creator stance here, we're no longer victims of our past, we have to consider, what is it that I feel that I was robbed of? Because who cares, like, what someone does? We are actually selfish human beings. Regardless of whether you accept it or not, we're selfish. And we felt in that situation that that person's actions impacted my life in some way. And this goes for all conflicts in your life. It impacted your life in some way. You know that. You shared your victim story. This is how it impacted your life. Now let's get more clear. What is it that was taken from you? Because the thing is, we are people, we are actually beings that want, not are acting from lack. So that's why, kids or even adults, no matter how much you give them, their brains are always wired to think of what they want more of. Oh, but I want this. Oh, but I want that. I never get enough affirmation or validation or attention, or I never have enough stuff, and I never have enough money, and I never have. We're wired into want, and that's okay. But it's also a gift right now, because, hey, why are you so mad that that person did that thing? Well, that's because you think that they took something from you that you felt entitled to. And you maybe were entitled to it. You probably were, because it probably has to do with something that you felt you didn't get to be, that was your inherent nature and your authentic self that was impeded upon, and you didn't get to be. So in my situation, in that example, I felt completely robbed of the joy of my life. I felt like you took my life away. You took my life of adventure away. You took my joy away. You even took away all the things that were exciting in my life because of how you manipulated us into being in this house that I didn't want to even be in. I was mad about being in that situation where it kind of disrupted our family dynamics quite a bit and didn't necessarily promote. I mean, obviously in the end it promoted a lot of growth, but at the time it didn't feel like it. It caused a lot of turmoil. And I feel like you robbed me of a harmonious family. So there's a lot of elements there. And you can write a list of all the things. If you felt like you were robbed of 10 things, write 10 things. But you have to think about, what is it that you were really mad that you didn't get to do? I had in my head a picture painted of my expectation of how I was going to get to live ages 20 to 22. And I did not, and I, in my subconscious mind, felt disappointed that I did not get to have that experience. Now, we also have other more traumatic experiences. If people who have big T traumas, those big T traumas generally result in some level of feeling like your childish, your inner child was stolen from you. You feel like your innocence was stolen from you. But that's another deeper question that's going to lead into simultaneously what we learned in the last lesson and later on in this lesson, which is also that, well, what belief was implemented in your mind that makes you believe that you are now no longer innocent? That's a complex subject, but for now, I just want you to focus on what you think was taken from you. Because once you have that, now you can do the step 2 of this micro step, okay? So this is the step called replacing what is stolen and forgiving by replacing. So first you have to notice, what do I believe is stolen? And second is, how can I replace it and take it back? A lot of times we have this perception in our mind that once it was taken from us, we can't have it back. The joy was taken in my life, now I'm never gonna be happy ever again. And that's what leads into depression and spiraling. My innocence was stolen from me, therefore I never get to be a child again. And while it is true that maybe you can't go back to being 8 years old and being an innocent child, you can reclaim the child within you. That child within you never dies. Your inner authentic soul never dies. If you wanted to be some version of yourself that you can no longer be anymore, well then maybe it wasn't your authentic self. Maybe you didn't even want to be he or her in the first place. So think about whether the thing that you think was taken from you, if you've told yourself this story that you can't be that anymore, that's a story that you're telling yourself. We're here to be heroes of our story, not victims. And so the last lesson, take as much time as you need to get through that victim story, because now that we're in this phase right here, there's no more room for victimhood. We are trying to make solutions to be happy, joyful, fulfilled, confident, and in love with ourselves. So this is how you get there. To fall back in love with yourself and in love with your life, you have to love your life by replacing the thing that you think was taken. So once you move through that process, I want you to think about what you need to replace and be more specific about how you can replace that thing. So if I were to say in an example that I felt like my joy was taken from me by having to be, maybe I've told myself this story that I have to be responsible all the time and I didn't get to enjoy being in my 20s. Let's just say it. I don't think that that's the exact story I was telling myself, but in that situation, let's say I was telling myself, I have to be this now. This experience happened, and so now I have to be this. And I don't really want to be this. Responsible all the time, working all the time. I never get to have any fun. I never get to go out, all of these things. But then I asked myself the question, wait, do I really have to do that? Do I really have to be responsible all the time, or only when I need to be responsible? And responsible is also a weird subject, because it's like, was I telling myself being responsible is actually being like conscious with your choices that are aligned with your values and future intent, right? That would be being responsible. Well, am I painting this weird picture of what the word responsible means? Am I saying, oh, I have to be responsible all the time, as in I have to be the strict one, I have to be the stable one because everyone else is so emotional and volatile, I have to be the one who works harder than everyone else because no one's gonna work on it except for me? And those are more specific splinters of the thing you've told yourself you have to be. Because then I can look at that and go, wait, yeah, maybe I still want to be responsible. Maybe it's not responsible that I don't want to be. I actually do want to be responsible. But I don't want to have to work all the time. I don't want to have to be the strict sibling. I don't want to have to be this person who is straight-faced all the time and has to be the emotionally stable one. I want to be myself. In the end, most of the things that you want are going to come back to you wanting to be you, but feeling like you have no permission to be you. Permission is a huge element and a huge theme of forgiving, because to replace, you have to give yourself permission to replace it. We've told ourselves this story that we are not allowed to be certain things because of a pain that we experienced in the past that caused us to suffer. But you holding on to that is making you suffer. You're choosing to allow yourself to continue to suffer. So in my example, I'd have to define what it means to be irresponsible. For me, I wanted to be more childish. I wanted to be more connected to who I really was. I was not someone who was just straight-faced all the time. Maybe in moments, maybe you've seen my other videos and I am straight-faced. But I also want to go play with my siblings, and I'm gonna go for a hike and joke about things that I totally maybe don't even care about, don't have much weight to them. I want to express that inner joy, that inner childishness. I also want experiences. What was I really upset about? I was mad that I had to, what I felt was sacrifice joy in my life. Well, I was really just mad that I didn't have any friends. I was mad that I didn't have any friends who had the same hobbies as me. That's what I was calling, I was having no fun. I wanted fun in my life, but what did fun entail? What I specifically wanted was to have friends who enjoyed the same hobbies and activities as me. And over the span of probably, I guess we're at 3 years now, I've worked intentionally every day to replace the thing that I specifically was mad that I didn't have. So now you're going to start to realize that your forgiveness was less about the pain that was caused to you, but about the thing that you didn't get to have, which you wanted to have. So what is it that you want? What is it that you want? Your forgiveness is an indicator into that oh so secret thing that is so hard for us to identify, but it's right there in front of you if you know your pain. The thing you want is right there before your eyes when you know your story and you know your suffering. And so what you now get to do is that you get to look at your story, you get to look at the things that you think you were robbed of, and you have to replace. Generally, it ends up falling into these 3 different things. 1, you can replace fear with courage. If you feel like your confidence and courage was taken from you, and you now feel insecure and sad and worried, or maybe not sad, insecure and worried and fearful, easy. Not that easy, but it is easy, because those are a direct reflection of feeling like your confidence and courage was taken from you. Now another example. Number 2 is that if you felt lack, you can replace it with abundance. Now, that's a really vague thing, but anytime you felt like there was a lack of something, and that could have been a lack of money, it could have been a lack of attention, it could have been a lack of motivation, whatever lack you felt, you can choose to replace with an abundance of it. So specifically, let's say you felt a lack of money. Whether someone took it from you and someone caused it or not doesn't matter. But if you felt that lack, you can recognize that your choice, you can choose to fill your life with the thing that you felt a lack of, because it wasn't that you felt a lack of money. It was that you maybe felt a lack of having the thing that you wanted. Maybe you wanted to buy a certain thing. Maybe you wanted a certain opportunity that was dependent on money. And you need to now break that down and specifically think about why you felt that lack. What is it that you wanted? Because you can replace it with abundance. I know it sounds like a generalization, especially when we think of the grand scheme of money. You can just have the money that you want. Well, maybe not, but you can have the thing that you want the money to give you. Number 3, you can replace anger with a desire. Anger is either an unidentified, more vulnerable emotion, or it's an unfulfilled desire. That is all that anger is. It's one of those 2 things. And if it's not one of the other, if your anger is not rooted in a sense of lack or a sense of fear, then it is rooted in an unfulfilled desire. And that's kind of the gist of all of this section that I've been going over of replacing. Your anger is an indicator into something that you wanted and you didn't get it. This is a wonderful thing because it's telling you what you want. Because now that you know what you want, you can visualize it, you can think about it, and you'll manifest it. You'll create an action plan to make it happen. It'll start to be your RAS, your RAS, reticular activating system, will start to see the thing that you wanted instead of the thing that you had the absence of. And that's how you start to move into a place of actually experiencing forgiveness. Through all of this, you're essentially getting to the point where you realize that there's just something that you wanted and you got it was taken from you, and you have the power to now replace it. So regardless of who you feel like you need to forgive, whether it's some acquaintance, someone who was close to you, it was a family member, someone you still see, someone you don't see, or it's yourself, you have to go through that previous process of replacing what you feel was stolen from you. Now there's more to it. The next step is you need to go through the letting go phase, specifically the LETGO formula, the let go formula. The acronym for let go stands for, the first thing you have to do is listen. Second thing is empathize. The third thing is you have to tell the truth about your thoughts and emotions and experience. G is to give up your victim story. And five, I went from letters to numbers here. And then O is that you need to offer an apology. So if your first instinct to all of that is, especially my last one, is I can't do that. then you haven't gone through lesson 1 enough. You have not gone through telling your story enough. You have not allowed yourself to feel the pain to the extent that you hoped someone else would offer you the consolidation on. You have to consolidate yourself enough for long enough to get to the point where this is a tangible possibility. You also may need to replace the things that you feel were taken from you before you can even consider doing this. But you are going to have to get to this point. If you actually want to move on and let this stuff go from the past, and so it's not hanging on you and making you trapped in this cage, you're gonna have to do this process. So let's go through that a little bit slower this time. So the first L in let go is to listen. So this is the point, moving through the let go formula, this is the phase where you have to be ready to take ownership. You are essentially the bigger person here. And of course, this is a little more complicated when we're talking about forgiving yourself, but let's say, all of our situations, even when the ones we have to forgive ourselves, it's because they were rooted in someone else first that we tend to put the blame on. And so we're at this phase of let's just say it was all our fault. I know that's hard to imagine, but you should be at this point ready to face that. Let's just say it's all your fault. It probably isn't. It's not. We're going to get to that later about it's not your fault. But for now, you have to embrace that for a sec. Because the first thing you need to do is understand is you're going to show up for that person. You need to forgive and you need to listen. Now, there's a variation of this is different for people you do see and don't see. If you do not see this person anymore and they are already so distant, and this would be a situation like, someone who was like an ex whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, an ex something, or even like a family member who's been fully shut out of the family and you don't see anymore. You don't have to actually listen. You can go through essentially the same process because listen is followed by empathize. Listen is if you do not understand that person at all and you have never taken the opportunity to consider that maybe they're just as hurt as you are or even more hurt than you are. Listen is where you are being a hero and a creator and allowing yourself to be the soundboard for them to get to tell their story, because you got to you told your story to heal, and unfortunately no one was there for you. No one was there for you to help you heal, but you were strong and you did it for yourself. But maybe you can offer this world your service and your loving light to share with the world, and maybe because no one was there for you, maybe you can be there for someone else and listen as they tell their story. And after you listen, the next phase is you are going to empathize. And these might work interchangeably. And once you kind of know their story, you have the ability to go, I wonder what that was like to be you. For some people, empathizing comes naturally. And the ironic thing is, sometimes people who are seemingly empathetic are not actually good at empathy. They think they're good at empathy. They think they're good at feeling the feelings of other people, and a combination of working the room or making everyone feel good about themselves and just making everyone happy and be no conflict. That doesn't mean you're good at empathy, because those people are oftentimes doing it from a survival mechanism that they were taught that, if they had difficult, big T trauma, or they had parents who were very critical, or I don't know, anything related to trying to protect yourself from conflict, you get good at reading people, reading mannerisms, reading emotions that people are sending off signals to, and you're good at keeping people happy. That doesn't make you good at empathy. That's good at feeling people's feelings, but empathy means you step into someone's shoes and consider what it must have been like to be them. Gosh, that must have been so hard to be that person who didn't have a mom, and then you got into this relationship and that relationship didn't really care about you, and then your sister rejected you, and then all of these things, and then you interacted with me and I gave you this sort of thing, but then I rejected you too, so that must have been really hard. Obviously, that's a random example, but you can look at the person you're trying to forgive the same way and go, man, that must have been hard to be you. Because remember, just like you, that person has a negativity bias. And even if amazing things have happened in their life, just like you, they might not appreciate it enough because this story has been weighing on them for so long, and maybe even their whole lives, they've never been able to tell it to anyone, which is why it's sometimes such a gift to give back to the world with your loving light and listen to them. So after you listen, after you empathize, and I like to think of with empathize, I listened to Brene Brown's books a long time ago, and I remember it I remember being super impactful at the time that I listened to them. I think now I don't see it as impactful, but there was one huge takeaway that I had from those Brene Brown books almost a decade ago, and it was how she shared that life works out better when you assume that everyone is trying their best. And while I don't necessarily try to carry that with me all the time, because I believe that I try to see people as what they're capable of as opposed to what they are. And obviously in some situations that doesn't help, but here at Be the Hero Academy, you need that person in your life. Everyone wants someone in their life that can push them to their greatness, and not just greatness of potential, like greatness of happiness. But there are situations in your life, like forgiveness, where it does serve you to consider this, that everyone is trying their best. And so if you can listen to someone and empathize with them and go, wow, that must have sucked to be you because you were trying your best and all this stuff still happened to you. They were trying their best and life still dealt them these difficult things. That can help majorly with giving that empathy and considering, being compassionate about the fact that everyone's life is hard. Even if some people's lives are harder than others, give them the benefit of the doubt for a minute and assume that they've been doing their best this whole time and it's still just been hard. Now, after that, you need to tell the truth. This is the T and L-E-T. You need to tell the truth. And this is a hard thing to do because oftentimes it takes us a long time of processing, and then we need to get far enough away from our pain to be able to objectively look at what we experience, because it gets complicated and overwhelming. And you're like, I don't even know how to put into words what it is that I thought and felt and experienced in my experience with this person. Like when you're in it and when you're close to it, you go, I don't know which parts of my story are relevant to share. And I don't know if that's even, it gets confusing, it gets mucky and muddy, whatever the word. And sometimes this part might take time. It might take time for you to even get to the let go phase, because you do need to know how to tell the truth about what it was that you experienced. I remember one time when I lived in Polson, right before we moved out, I was embracing that whole surrender mentality, and I was ready to surrender all the things that I was previously carrying with me. And one of the big things I was carrying with me was the feeling of absolute betrayal that I experienced with my closest friends when we moved into an RV to travel full time, and how they really didn't accept me for who I was and how I was rejected. And I felt so betrayed by people that I thought I could trust. And that required a lot of forgiveness. And I remember I probably had seen my best friends, let's just say it was probably 2017. And that was probably one of the last times I saw those people. And then in 2022, so that is about 5 years later. It took me 5 years, you guys, to go from when the incident happened to processing the forgiveness. And I called one of my best friends. I remember I wished her a happy birthday as basically an opening into offering if she'd be interested in talking sometime. And I said hey, I wanted to catch up. And I called her. And the first thing that, I don't want to spoil my last two symbols and acronyms, but it took me a long time to get to that point, because to be ready to give that phone call, because I needed to know how to express what I felt. Because in her mind, it doesn't matter the convolutions of what her experience was, but she is probably experiencing a pain as well. That's the part where we empathize, right? They probably witnessed a pain in that situation just as much as I did. I empathize with that, but I also needed her to know that some people are not gonna be as empathetic as you are. So you need to give them the opposite of the benefit of the doubt. Kind of assume that they're clueless. Assume that they are clueless in knowing what you experienced. We're selfish beings, remember? You have to assume that they are clueless to what you went through. And so you need to try to offer in an emotionally from an emotionally neutral place, you need to communicate to them what you experienced and why there was conflict in the first place. You need to clarify that misunderstanding, because a lot of our pain is a misunderstanding. And it's a misunderstanding because a lot of people will never have the capacity to really witness you and understand your human experience, and that's okay. But you can try your best to mitigate this misunderstanding by telling the truth, especially when you're in this post-experience situation of trying to forgive now. And so, jumping to the next two, I'm going to come back to that story, but the next two are to give up your victimhood and offer an apology. So simultaneously, when I gave that phone call, it was me telling the truth, giving up my victimhood, and offering an apology. And here's why. To give that phone call, and to do the next step, which is to offer an apology, I had to take ownership for the fact that maybe it was all my fault. It doesn't matter if it was not your fault. It doesn't matter, because you are trying to, and you can't, remember that it doesn't matter. It is not your fault, but it is your fault in the sense that I don't want you to call this person, offer an apology, try to empathize, and be that kind of person who's trying to be like, I'm sorry, but you did this thing. That ego defense mechanism. Have you ever met someone like that who really, no matter how hard they try, they have no capacity to actually take responsibility for the fact that it was their fault? You want to actually take responsibility here. I need you to. Otherwise, you're not going to forgive. You're going to repeat patterns, and you're going to be that person who is always playing the victim. Don't play the victim and take ownership here. So you do need to tell the truth, but you also need to apologize as if you were the one who caused the pain. And it's so hard. I know. It's really hard because of the fact that you feel like you're never going to get credit for the fact that you stepped up and were the bigger person. You're never going to get credit for it. But life is going to give you credit for it. The universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is going to give you credit for it because you will be able to move past it. And in the end, that's what we want to do. We want to move past our pain. In the end, that's like the epitome of a fulfilling life is not about how much money you have, what car you drive, what house you have. It's about your capacity to move beyond your pain. So you have to do this. No one's going to give you credit for it. So I called my old friend, and I remember I said, hey, how's it going? Went through the introductions there, the classic openers, and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm really sorry. Then I sandwiched it with saying the truth. I said, hey, it was really hard for me at the time that you rejected me because I trusted you so much, and I really loved who you were. And I loved having you in my life, and I felt really hurt that you didn't care about my life. But I understand now that I shouldn't have cared, and we were living different lives. I had some understanding of the fact that we are living different lives. You went to school, I was traveling the world, all of these things, and I get it. And so I am sorry if I caused you any pain. And in return, she said, oh, okay, truly was clueless, right? And that's okay. In a best way, everyone is allowed to be clueless, and they should be clueless because they're living their life. And she said in return, after she said, oh wow, I didn't know that, I didn't realize that, she said, I'm sorry too. She didn't have as much maybe of an eloquent apology as I did, but it doesn't matter because I still got that apology. And it's funny because I remember specifically when I hung up the phone, sitting there for a second and thinking, the apology in return didn't feel as good as I expected. However, the apology I gave felt even better than I expected. Because that's when you start to realize, like I shared in the introduction, that, holding on to anger is like holding onto a hot coal with the intent to throw it at someone else. You get burned. And so that situation is kind of an example of my apology of letting go of the hot coal felt better than receiving the apology from someone else. And so the Let Go formula is going to be your guidance into how to approach a conversation with someone that you need to apologize to. Now, if you cannot and don't feel like it is fitting for you to call up that person that you can't forgive, so you're like, I don't need to call up an ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, ex-wife, ex-girlfriend, whatever, you don't need to do that. You can go through this same process without having to actually confront that person if it feels right. Okay, so I have someone in my life that is kind of that same situation, And I can listen and empathize the same, because I can go and I can imagine, knowing what I already knew about that person, I can empathize. I knew enough about that person without having to listen, and I listened to them enough in their life to know where they were coming from. And I can empathize and I can go, man, that must have been really hard, and they must have been trying their best. Then I can tell the truth to myself. I can go back to lesson 1 and I can tell my story. And then here's what you can do to go through the give up your victimhood and offer an apology. You can write a letter of forgiveness to that person that person never has to see. They never have to know about it. You might want to write that letter of forgiveness a couple times, but in the process of you writing that apology letter, writing that forgiveness letter to that person and saying what you would have said if you gave them a call or saw them in person, it has the same effect on you, because remember, it's about you sharing the apology that lets go of the hot coal rather than them saying sorry back to you. Yes, it helps if they say sorry. It always makes us feel a little bit better, but you'll get the same result whether or not you have to talk to them again. So with that formula, you can forgive, you can let go. Let go will help you release that baggage that you're holding on to. You can do essentially the same process when it comes to forgiving yourself. Again, it really is going to come back to your story. Forgiving yourself is kind of about just going through the same process you did in lesson 1, but this time maybe with a slightly different perspective. And the key part is that, yes, you're going to listen and empathize and tell the truth to yourself. That's what telling your story was all about. You need to listen to yourself. You need to listen to yourself more than anyone else has ever listened to you. You need to empathize with yourself more than anyone has ever empathized for you, because no one else is going to do it. You need to say, oh man, it makes sense that you got to that point in your life. I get it, You shouldn't give yourself such a hard time. You've been through a lot, and it's kind of only natural that you ended up kind of in that shitty situation. And then you got to tell the truth, and you have to be like, yeah, in your story, you're saying, I think and feel like this, and this is how it was, and I didn't understand why it went this way, but then this happened, and so, then I just didn't know what to do. And you have to tell the truth how you would explain it to someone else. And then you're trying to forgive yourself. You need to give up your victimhood. And honestly, you do get to play, to some extent, you do get to play the victim when you're forgiving yourself, but don't think of it as victimhood. Think of it as treating yourself like someone you love. It is so much easier to forgive a loved one. Think of it like, a significant other, a sibling, a parent. We forgive them, but why can't we just forgive ourselves? Offer an apology to your past self. Say, I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. The person you are now, this higher version of yourself, this mature, responsible, and keyword, emotionally mature version of yourself. Gosh, I wish you could have been there for me. I wish I could have been me talking to my past self. I wish I could have been there for you. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. You did so good. I'm so proud of you. But I'm here for you now, and it's gonna be okay. And you have to speak to yourself as if you were the parent you never had. This is like where that term, that I don't know who coined it, but the term came, reparenting yourself. You have to treat your past self like someone that you get to now parent. You are the parent you never had, and you can look back at your past self and release a lot of that burden by just looking back at your past self and saying to yourself the words that you wish you got to hear. That's all from me from this video. This is how you can let go. In our next video, we're gonna go a little bit deeper into how to set boundaries with people you do have to continue to interact with, who don't have the emotional maturity to actually receive your apology, and what to do with it at that point. Namaste.